Hi again. So welcome to part two of the lecture. The previous slide we were discussing fast foods and all the packaged foods and sugar sweetened beverages you can get. So on this slide, we'll talk about the three dietary factors that contribute to heart disease. So rather than show pictures of cakes and breakfast cereals, a lot of different types of packaged foods, I wanted to just kind of focus on the ingredients that are very typical throughout a lot of different packaged foods. From cereals to breads, you can find a lot of what we call processed or refined flours, other starches like corn starches to fill and to add calories, added sugars to make it taste good and add calories. Synthetic and refined oils, trans fat, partially hydrogenated oils, and I'll talk a little bit about this later. Salt, other additives to increase shelf life. A lot of ingredients that are difficult to pronounce. It looks like a chemistry set. So those are all kind of typical of a lot of packaged foods. You'll see enriched flour as the first ingredient. And then sugar sweetened beverages, of course, are just essentially straight sugar. The second one is saturated fat. The government does make a recommendation for the reduction of this. It's mainly found in all animal products. Most animal products, meats and whatnot, it's the flesh of the animals, so it has protein, but it also has varying percentages of saturated fat, and that's definitely a nutrient to get less of. The third one is a lack, actually, of that contributes to heart disease is a lack of all of these foods. We know we don't get enough of whole grains. That's whole grain breads. That's your corn, just straight corn tortillas. We consider that a whole grain. That's oats, whatnot. Legumes, which beans fall under those, lentils and peas. We don't get enough vegetables, fruits, nuts, or seeds. So all of these foods are foods that help fight heart disease, as well as others such as Alzheimer's, obesity, and diabetes, which Hispanics are very much at risk for and do suffer from disproportionately, and some cancers. So what diets contribute to heart health? Well, most of the studies are done on, and I didn't put the actual name here, but it's on a Mediterranean or like vegetarian dietary pattern. So the first study it's a large 5-year study on vegetarian eating patterns, and they found that those eating patterns are associated with a lower heart disease risk and death rates. The second study ties into one of our slides, and I thought that this was appropriate. It was a 5-year study that was done several years ago. It was an intensive lifestyle change that included several different components, but one of them which was a lower fat, whole foods vegetarian diet, and it showed an increase in the diameter of the arteries. And remember, before I showed you that side view of what the cholesterol plaques look like inside of the artery. So this study showed that it increased the diameter of the arteries, meaning that those plaques, the body healed itself from eating more of these vegetarian foods, and the plaque essentially went away, and that, or not completely, but it went away significantly and also decreased the cholesterol levels. So there's the third study. It's a review study of about 49 studies on vegetarian eating patterns that were compared with animal-based diets. And again, here the vegetarian diet showed that it lowered total cholesterol. So this is to the nutrition portion. The activity today, we're going to be talking about MyPlate. So MyPlate replaced the government pyramid, some of you may remember. This one's a lot more accessible because we all eat off of a plate. And here on the left, in the middle and the left, I provide 2 plates because people are doing different plates to show that you can get different nutrients. So the first one is a Mediterranean or a vegetarian. It can be a vegan plate. And the difference between this plate and the MyPlate, which is the government plate, is 2 things. So legumes here are for more of a Mediterranean or vegetarian, more of a vegetarian diet. And over here, it shows protein, which also includes animal protein. The Mediterranean plate includes water because those diets may or may not include dairy, but they can include maybe some cheese or some yogurts and whatnot. The interesting thing to note here about this government plate is the protein portion. The government used to just put meats, and this is the first time the government recommends or recognizes that there are plant-based proteins, and that's going to be one of the activities we're doing today. So just 3 points here. So MyPlate is ideally a balanced nutrition at every meal. And what it does include, it includes protein or legume, complex carbs, which could be from your grains, your starches, and then vegetables, non-starchy vegetables on this side, some fruits, 1 to 2 servings a day, and then dairy or dairy alternatives, which can be dark leafy greens, beans, and fortified plant milks. Those also provide calcium because dairy, as this last note says, may not be tolerated by everyone. So we want to find out, for those that don't, how can we accommodate other diets and make them balanced? So from the plate, protein is the first stop here. We're just going to talk a little bit about its function and how much we need and so on. So functions are, it makes up muscles. It also makes up organs, part of bone. It helps support your immune system. It has many functions in the body. So protein is it's very important. How much do we need? 10 to 15% of calories, or 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. So the example that I've given here is for an average height person with a healthy weight would need approximately 49 grams of protein a day. So the sources are all meats, dairy, seafood, soy foods. There's those legumes again, and the issues that we may have will be we can get up to twice the amount of animal protein that we need. This is most Americans. 1.5 to up to 2 times the amount we need. And the government tracks data on this, and we know that excess protein can be stored as fat and is also linked to heart disease. But just as a note here on the Americans get twice the amount of protein, some people may not be able to afford animal protein, and this is a good link into plant-based proteins, because you can eat relatively cheaply, with a pot of beans and other protein-rich plant foods. The last point here, it's also associated with increased stress on the kidneys, bone demineralization, and some cancers such as colon. The next and second to last category of what we call macronutrients is carbohydrates, also called starches. So if you notice here, I've included all the plates, all the components, because all the components of the MyPlate actually contain starches, or can. With the exception of protein, if it's animal protein does not have carbohydrates. Dairy milk does have milk sugar. Plant proteins have carbohydrates. Vegetables, non-starchy and starchy vegetables, which can also be in the grain category here, have carbohydrates. Fruits, of course, and then I just mentioned the dairy. So what are the functions? It's the most valuable food source of food energy. It's essentially the fuel for your car. So if you're going to the gas station in the morning, you want to fill it with carbohydrates. It prefers that as fuel rather than protein. Protein is really just for repair and other things. How much do we need? 55 to 75%. So it can make up the bulk of your diet, and it depends. And this is more individual specific. I also put that 130 grams is what we need daily. The sources are complex carbs, which that means that they're bound to the fiber and the protein and the fat. So that would be like your whole grain bread. Starchy vegetables, potatoes, tubers, root vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, broccoli, carrots, those sorts of things. There's the legumes again, and fruits, nuts, and seeds. So other sources and the issues, I've kind of put these two together, is those simple carbs that we mentioned. I didn't mention them as some fruits, but some fruits can be a problem for some people, converting very rapidly into sugar, a very ripe banana as an example. That includes refined sweeteners or white sugar, white flour, cornstarch, white or brown sugar, even agave syrup. So it's essentially anything that's been concentrated for some type of packaged food. We just need to watch the amount that we're having there, and I can give you some good guides with the handouts we'll be giving today. And the last category of nutrients is fats and oils. So we have our proteins, we have our carbohydrates, and our fats. So that's kind of what we look at as the big picture for basic nutrition. So fats are kind of misunderstood, but in our body, fats are components of all of our cells in the body, every cell in our body. It provides the structure, it insulates, it provides protection to the body itself, and it's used for making hormones. And those are just some of the functions. So types of dietary fats and oils. So we already talked about saturated fat, mainly found in animal products. I included coconut oil and palm oil. Those are your plant-based sources of saturated fat. Palm oil is a pretty popular, coconut oil is a pretty popular product right now. So a lot of people ask me, oh, should I put it in my coffee? And I said, not necessarily. So we can probably get enough and have enough oil in our diets, especially saturated fat. You can use coconut oil for other things. I can talk about that, maybe a little bit in baking. So mono and polyunsaturated fat. Here are some examples. Those are more the whole foods, which are olives, and the extracted oils, which are vegetable, canola, and olive, and then back to the whole foods, which are avocados. Those have good oil, nuts, seeds, whole grains, and then legumes and other plants. So these whole grains contain smaller amounts of good types of oil. They're more intact or whole foods. And the last category is essential fatty acids, which I'm not going to necessarily cover here unless some people are interested in it during our discussion when we're doing the activity. Also hydrogenated oils I mentioned here too, and we've got some label reading information along with the saturated fat that discusses those and how to avoid. How much do we need? 15 to 20% of our calories a day, no more than 35%. Some people say you need less fat. You need 10 to 15%, but we understand that fat from those sources that I mentioned are preferred, and they provide protective factors for the body as well as other things. So, and again, we talked about the saturated fat. I just gave you a little extra information here that we can discuss. So on to the seminar activities. So we've got a pretest. We'd like to just 5 questions. We kind of wanted to find out what your nutrition knowledge is. You're going to learn how to identify saturated fat from a label and also from food models. We also have a very nice 2-page list of common plant-based proteins. And then from there, you're going to learn how to create a balanced plate using pictures from magazines that we're going to provide. That's going to give you all the components that you need, the protein, the starches, the vegetables, the good fats. And then also we're going to give you resources for supplemental food programs in case you have that need. And then we would really enjoy if you filled out an evaluation form, because we'd like to know how we're doing so we can improve. So I've also included too a trifold a handout that I made how to enjoy the shopping experience without being distracted by too many of those kinds of foods we talked about, and being prepared so you can read through that. And then here's just an example of the two of the handouts that we're going to give you. And, the idea is just to get less of saturated fat and to include some plant-based proteins. So